Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Behind Headlines, and in this programme we'll be discussing the greatest American political comeback in history as Donald Trump wins the US presidency 2024. He becomes the most powerful Republican president since Ronald Regan won his landslide election back in 1984. As Trump not only won the college votes that determined he would be America's next president, but he also won both houses of Congress, won the popular vote, and now looks to have power over America's Supreme Court. And essentially we have a very powerful Trump returning to office in January 2025. And we'll be asking, what impact will the Trump administration have on pushing back the globalist ambitions of the Democrats? And in terms of prophecy, where are we now in terms of a Trump presidency? Regan, it's great that you're back from Central Africa and back on Behind the Headlines. I definitely missed you, but it's great to have you back.
It's good to be back, and it was a great time in Uganda, but it's quite amazing to be able to land as I did last Wednesday and open my phone and to see just the massive groundswell victory of Trump over Kamala Harris. I had the day before filled out the election map predictor, and I felt that Trump would have 281 electoral college votes, enough to win, so I was cautious but confident. But he far surpassed that, taking 312 electoral college votes, and there you have it, 226 only for Kamala Harris. All of the signs over the past few months were pointing to a victory by the former president, now President-elect Donald Trump. And it's going to be interesting to unpack what we can expect, and it'll be even more interesting to see the following 4 years unfold.
No, absolutely. And firstly, I couldn't very much sleep. I don't think you can sleep very well when you know that you've got a US presidency election coming on. The American people had just been to the polls back on Tuesday, the 5th of November. And, as our mainstream media reported and all the polls indicating this was going to be a very, very close, tight election. The opposite was complete landslide for Trump. But it felt like I was waking up as I was looking at Sky News coverage in the early hours of the morning, that a ray of light had really shone through the darkness, that this darkness that has been over us and over the West over the last few years, it felt like it lifted, as if something spiritually was broken. My only thoughts then is that, the American people said enough of extreme liberal, woke, progressive ideas, enough of putting abortion at the forefront of the election campaigns, enough of these awful kind of extreme gender confusion, trans issues. That's all been put on the back burner. Common sense has come into play. Yeah. Nationalism has again returned instead of globalism. So the kind of big question we have to ask, particularly as Donald Trump has got a huge mandate on behalf of the American people, will he be able to put the brakes on the move towards globalism? Will he be able to slow down the moves towards a central digital currency and a central digital bank, as well as the social credit system? Will he be able to stop this huge tide of mass immigration and open borders, which is designed by the globalists to destroy the nation state? I think he's given people in this country as well a great deal of hope, a lot of Christians hope across Europe and across the West, knowing that for 4 years we could have a strong American government that's showing true leadership in the world that we didn't see under Biden and Harris. And we could see the brakes towards world government really slowed down under his administration. He will be hated, but now they can never accuse the American people of Trump being a legitimate president because he won the popular vote and both houses of Congress.
There is technically still a vote count underway in relation to the House, but he is all but set to take both houses, as we've said. What's so important in any case for Christians to remember in these elections and in this scenario is it is God who gives us the authorities that we have. He is the one who gives us what we have, both for good, for mercy, and for judgment. And it's our responsibility to pray for and seek to to lift up while speaking truth to the power that is. What should be reassuring, any concerns over Trump and his personal integrity aside, which is very reassuring, is that we don't have a party that has built its whole platform on abortion. We have a party that is very clear on allowing legal migration versus rampant illegal immigration. It is being an asylum seeker is not a crime. It is not illegal if you go through a legal point of entry and declare asylum. There's no problems with that. However, what we have is a massive problem of people coming through the borders, not declaring asylum at legal points of entry. And this has created a mass out of control situation. We also have a little bit more common sense on some of the gender ideology areas, the education sector, which has been heavily criticized and come under a great deal of critique from concerned individuals, not the least of which were religious leaders and parents, particularly in regard to ongoing corruption of youth through early sexualization and all sorts. That's set to be halted as well. And there's already some indicators of pushback on some of the extreme leftist ideology that's there. There's also concerns, there's also things that we can ask questions over that we need to be watchful and pray over. Trump has backed down on abortion to a degree. Anyone who's thinking that he is pro-life needs to look at what he said. He's very clear he is not pro-life, but he has given the decision to the states as a Supreme Court under Trump, was striking this down, striking Roe versus Wade down, which was a federal right to abortion across the board. So he's tempered his rhetoric in regard to abortion somewhat. Can he be trusted in relation to Israel and the Middle East? There are questions. It seems he can be. He has been a friend of Israel in the past. There are questions regarding the present Ukraine and Russia as well, question marks. But there's a lot to be hopeful about.
Yeah, and also I think we have to look at the stark reality of why the American electorate decided to vote for Donald Trump on Tuesday, the 5th of November. And I've got to say that was the fear of the liberal progressive agenda of Kamala Harris and the prospect of her becoming president, because we know that she put abortion at the forefront of her political campaign, which was mounted to about $1 billion US, and probably one of the worst defeats the Democrats have had in decades, probably going back to the 1980s with Ronald Regan when he was re-elected back in 1984. So it's a huge shock for them. But also we know that if Kamala Harris had won the presidency, it means that Christian freedoms and religious freedoms would have been very threatened. And the United States, under her, would have accelerated towards kind of globalism, giving more sovereignty and power to the UN, to international bodies, and of course, more chaos, more instability, more danger on the world scene. But, the American people decided, look, Trump was great on the economy 4 years ago, up until COVID. And we're going to trust him and his administration for a second time. So, what Trump has done as well is become only the second ever president to lose a presidential election, only to come back 4 years later and actually win it. So that wasn't until the kind of 1890s. So it's unprecedented, I think, what Donald Trump has done. And he has become the biggest political icon in American politics in the 21st century.
Issues that matter to voters in the United States are interesting to analyze, and Kamala Harris took a massive gamble on making abortion the primary platform on which she ran her campaign, seeking to appeal to the majority of women across the U.S. She failed to do that. She lost points with women as opposed to President Biden. He had a larger percentage of women vote for him than Harris has done. And it just goes to show there's this idea, there's this bubble in which so much of the Democratic Party resides that assumes that all women are chomping at the bit to have abortions and for their daughters and granddaughters to have abortions. And so, we have to have abortions. And so we're making this a woman's right to reproductive health care is the euphemistic way of putting it. But it's simply not something that the vast majority of Americans care about as a primary element on which to vote. When you have that aside, the evangelical and Roman Catholic side of things does actually look at that as a factor in who they decide to vote for.
But also I think Kamala Harris lacked that political legitimacy as she was parachuted in as the presidential candidate.
It didn't smell good.
Biden was told that you're not able to run and be re-elected. I think given a choice, he would have gone against Trump in the election in the election that's just passed. And of course, there was no vote in the kind of Democratic primaries for any other candidate. So effectively, she was the chosen choice. She was put in that position and lacked democracy and accountability.
There was no electoral mandate.
No, of course not. And the other aspect of her as well is that no one understood a word she was saying. So you listen to her speeches, you listen to what she's saying, she wasn't coherent. She couldn't put forward some coherent arguments and discussions on policies. She didn't seem to care about the economy, which we know under Biden-Harris, the American economy is really suffering with high inflation, that the ordinary American peoples are finding their standard of living absolutely dropping. So of course they wanted to be free of that, and that was a major factor. So not even to address this issue, not to address the issue of mass immigration into the country, issue to do with kind of law and order, but also stability on the world stage, is why the American electorate, including African Americans, including the Hispanic community, including Arab Americans, then turned to Trump. But also we see as well that I think about 20% of evangelicals, I'm not in the region, about 80% actually voted for Trump, which represented, that's right, 20% of the US electorate. But the big question is, there is no Nikki Haley in this administration. There is no Mike Pompeo. There will be no Mike Pence. So what Christian influence will there be on this new Trump administration?
This is a question that people need to be asking. Of course, there have been legitimate concerns over this whole period of time in which Trump has been on the political scene with character issues. And there are legitimate concerns that people have as to if an individual cannot be trusted in those issues, should he be trusted to lead the country? But there's also quite a few people who are looking at Trump, and I see the way this is rationalized as a Cyrus, an evil ruler, an evil individual in character without a biblical ethic, moral ethic, who is used by God to save his people, to save the nation. So I see that. I think we need to be very cautious, of course, about reading Trump into scriptural paradigms. At the same time, we do serve the God who's the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he has patterns with which he works. And sometimes we see what others may consider as foolish. He chooses to, through that foolishness, shame those who think they are wise. And certainly there's a massive mandate that Trump has received from the electorate on this occasion. There's no questions, there's no qualms, there's no sense of this was too close to call. He won by a resounding amount, the popular vote, by a resounding amount in the Electoral College. He has both houses as well, more or less, and what we're about to see is going to be very interesting. But without that evangelical influence, we do need to be watchful and wary.
Absolutely, but you have to admire Trump's character, of what he's been through. I mean, he's over the past 8 years, and now he returns to the White House. He has survived 8 years of the most brutal political attacks. These include 2 impeachments, 2 assassination attempts, also for criminal indictments, endless media ridicule and abuse, labelling him as a fascist, comparing him to Hitler, and against all odds, he won the presidency. But I am a little bit concerned about the isolationist wing within the Republican Party.
Vance is very heavy on this as well.
With, J.D. Vance. I like J.D. Vance, actually. I think he speaks very well. He speaks with authority and has common sense. But I'm also concerned about the likes of Tucker Carlson, the influence over Trump, and Candace Owen as well.
Very bad. Very bad.
Known to be very anti-Israel in recent years.
Yeah, not just anti-Israel. She hates Jews. In recent months, her attacks have been truly vile on people like Ben Shapiro.
Absolutely horrific. But also we see as well that we have to ask, the big question is, where does a Trump fit in terms of Bible prophecy? And I think what we're seeing really, if he fulfills his mandate, which he ran his election on, to push back on all these globalist policies and globalist ideas, then surely that God is giving America reprieve, and maybe the West reprieve for a few years. You can legislate for righteousness, but it's only God that can change the hearts of a nation. So let's have a look at this excellent CBN News report that tells us how President Trump won the presidency back on the 5th of November last week.
Now I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
And Harris spoke with Trump today to congratulate him. President Biden also called Trump with his congratulations. Trump flipped nearly all 7 swing states to become the 47th president of the United States.
The win means he'll be the second president in American history to win 2 non-consecutive terms, despite facing a criminal conviction, an attempted assassination bullet, and a historic opponent. CBN's Jennifer Wichon reports.
In a show of electoral might, Donald Trump has become the first president to win a non-consecutive race for the White House since Grover Cleveland did it more than 130 years ago. Trump's path to victory was blazoned by a trail that flipped nearly all of the coveted swing states. For MAGA faithful, it was a night of redemption. Joined by his wife Melania and his children, Trump stepped out to claim victory in the early hours of the morning.
Frankly, this was, I believe, the greatest political movement of all time. There's never been anything like this in this country.
He renewed his promises on the economy, immigration, and what he calls common sense leadership.
This will truly be the golden age of America. That's what we have to have.
Now he'll get to work forming his cabinet, along with J.D. Vance. And he pulled off something that's eluded Republicans for 20 years. Along with the Electoral College, Donald Trump is poised to win the popular vote. Trump won white women by 52%. He also won Latino men and white men. Christian voters also made a difference. Trump won 62% of the Protestant vote and 56% of the Catholic vote. Now comes the hard part of governing. He'll inherit an economy a majority of Americans say isn't working for them, along with 2 wars and mounting tensions with America's foes.
He's going to have to worry about not upsetting the U.S.-China relationship so much that the economic costs spill over into the security realm.
And reuniting the bitterly divided country.
I think what we have tonight is a red, white, and blue wave in this country.
And with Republican Bernie Moreno's Senate win in Ohio and Jim Justice's win in West Virginia, Trump will enjoy a Republican majority in the U.S. Senate. Dozens of House races across the country have yet to be called, but Speaker Mike Johnson, who won his bid for re-election in Louisiana, says he's confident the GOP will retain its majority. Republican control over the White House and Congress would give the GOP a big boost in passing its agenda.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason. And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together.
Still, many Christian leaders say followers of Jesus have an important responsibility as the nation works to move forward.
And so we're trying to show people a way to say, hey, regardless if you're a Democrat or a Republican, especially as a Christian, you have to be civil, you have to be constructive, and you have to be looking to help your neighbor.
As Christians, let's try to reconcile and move people closer together and move them forward.
And some leaders say it's okay for Christians to see themselves as outsiders, as Jesus calls us to be.
And when we recognize that we don't have to fit into our current cultural system, we can then engage our community, our culture, not out of anger or by complying to it, but instead in love.
Trump says he believes success is what will bring the country back together. When he starts implementing his agenda and the country has some wins, he believes the nation will begin to heal. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Always thankful to our friends at CBN for their efficiency and extreme relevance in reporting. Viewers would have seen some of those incredible statistics that were there of how handily Trump won this election. He was required to win 270 electoral college votes, and he won by a whopping 312 to 226 for Harris. He won 74,838,166 votes, 50.4% of the vote, and won all 7 key U.S. swing states needed for victory to return to the White House again. Kamala Harris won 226 electoral college votes and only 71,247,170 votes, representing 48% of the vote. And the small fractions there that are not indicated would have gone to a range of varying parties, third parties and fourth parties alike. The Republicans have taken Senate as well with 52 seats to the Democrats' 45. And in the House, there is still a battle ongoing, as it looks all but set that Trump has taken the House of Representatives. At filming, we see that there's 214 Republican seats to 205 Democrat seats, with 218 required to win 7 of the outstanding races yet to be called. The Republicans are leading in. So a resounding victory. This is a clean sweep, which makes Trump the most obvious president and the most powerful and a resounding victory since Ronald Reagan, all the way back in '84.
Yeah, Republican president.
Republican president, yeah,
which is quite extraordinary considering the opposition to keep him out of power. You know, had Trump won the presidency but lost the Senate or the Congress, he would have been a lame duck president. Now he's got an electoral mandate on behalf of the American people. The Democrats can't say then that, as in 2016, you might have won the Electoral College, which determined that you were the president, but you lost the popular vote. He won the popular vote. So now there is no contest. So there is no way the Democrats can effectively say that you are an illegitimate president, because the American people voted for Trump en masse. But also the Associated Press report here that Trump once again won the support of about 8 in 10 white evangelical voters. According to the AP Votecast, a sweeping survey of more than 120,000 voters, that level of support among the group represented 20% of the total electorate, repeats the staggering evangelical support that Trump received in 2020.
And Trump's win comes in part thanks to an improved performance among Catholic voters, who make up about a quarter of the electorate. Of course, Vance himself, J.D. Vance, is a Catholic. Also, we have RFK Jr., who is a professing Catholic. Also, he's kind of a universalist in his theology, but there's quite a few people who are Catholics on the team, so to speak. And we see the Catholic vote went for Trump by a 15-point margin. A Catholic himself, Biden won his fellow faithfuls in the 2020 contest, but 58% of Catholics voted for Trump over Harris this time, according to Washington Post's exit polls. With a national exit poll from CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, surveying nearly 1,600 Muslim voters, finding Green Party candidate Jill Stein getting 53% of the Muslim vote, with Trump at 21% and Kamala Harris at 20%. Very interesting statistics there. To be honest, I've never heard of anyone voting Green in the U.S.
Well, yeah.
It's the same in the UK as well.
Exactly, with the kind of general election and then, of course, the local elections as well. We
always
found
the same policies.
Islamists end up voting for the Green Party. Well, there you go. I don't know how that works, but
let them go
never
for
mind. The AP also reports under the headline of how 5 key demographic groups voted in 2024. So Trump's share of black voters rose slightly, driven larger by younger men. Trump was able to make a slight inroads within black voters nationally, who make up 1 in 10 voters across the country. Nationally, about 8 in 10 black voters supported Harris, but that was down from 9 in 10 in the last presidential election who went for Biden. Trump has doubled his share of the vote of young black men, which helped him among a key Democratic voting group, and about 3 in 10 black men under the age of 45 voted for Trump, roughly doubling the number that Biden won. And also Hispanic voters who were open to Trump more than they were in 2020. Roughly half of Latino men voted for Harris, down from about 6 in 10 for Biden. So we see really the kind of ethnic minority makeup of the United States went for Trump. He certainly won the men's vote. And what was extraordinary about this is that Kamala Harris effectively led her campaign with a $1 billion war chest as a fundamental attack on men, and paid a heavy electoral price for it.
Everything, I understand, Simon, the upset, the issues over certain abuses, certain horrors that are deemed to have been perpetrated by men, but at the same time, you also have to recognize that we're in a world that is equally shared, and there's culpability on all sides. So Kamala Harris's campaign ran the risk of demonizing men. Men are tired of being talked down to, and I'm talking about men of substance as well, men of character, men who have integrity, who are being treated as if they do not matter, as if their perspective is always warped, who are hated simply because they are men, and who are patronized, and there's so much condescension at times in how especially the left side of politics will address men. The whole platform of Harris was built on this idea of free, accessible women's reproductive rights, and the evil of the striking down of Roe versus Wade, the beauty of abortion, which takes the lives of unborn children and damages the women who undertake them as well. All of this was presented in this particular way. That was the platform on which she ran her whole campaign. She didn't really have any
other policies. She didn't have any policies of dealing with the economy. no idea what to do on the kind of world stage. And when she was asked in many TV interviews, would you do something different than what Biden has done, the president, she couldn't answer the question.
She hardly appeared on any TV interviews.
Which couldn't answer the question, which goes to say that she only fought on issues that she knew well about and that she cared about, but she thought she'd win the entire American female vote, which turned out to not be the case. But it's so interesting how Donald Trump has made inroads into the Democratic heartlands by picking up votes from the Latino community, from the Arab American community, also from African American community as well. He's made massive inroads.
Made some inroads into the Jewish community, which is normally Democrat.
Still 80% though voted for Harris.
I know, but yeah, I mean, normally it's more. Normally you would have more vote Democrat because of the prevalence of liberal reform Judaism in the U.S. I think many people felt there would be more vote for Trump than Harris, but he still made a couple of percentage points increase in that regard. So it's interesting to see how these demographics have changed and how they've shifted, and clearly it's every little bit has helped Trump in this case.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at our next CBN News report on the triumphant victory of Donald Trump, who returns in January as America's 47th president.
President-elect Trump is already huddling with advisors on how to tackle some of the major issues in the campaign, including inflation and the border crisis.
And every citizen, I will fight for you, for your family, and your future.
Trump is now projected to win the state of Arizona and is projected to have a total of 312 electoral votes against Vice President Kamala Harris's 226. Trump also won the popular vote by a margin of almost 5 million. Harris conceded Wednesday afternoon in an address from her alma mater, Howard University.
The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright.
Earlier, Harris called Trump to congratulate him. A Trump spokesman said both leaders agreed on the importance of unifying the country. President Joe Biden has invited Trump to the White House and will address the nation on the election outcome today. Most pollsters underestimated the level of Donald Trump's support in the third straight presidential election, predicting a neck-and-neck race with Harris. Trump won 81% of evangelicals, while picking up support among Latino and Black working-class voters, evidence the GOP is broadening its base and leaving Democrats to ponder the future direction of their party.
Democrats need to take a step back. We are out of touch with where the majority of the country wants to go.
Democratic Congressman Richie Torres posted on X, Donald Trump has no greater friend than the far left, which has managed to alienate historic numbers of Latinos, Blacks, Asians, and Jews from the Democratic Party with absurdities like defund the police, or from the river to the sea, or Latinx. With Republicans taking the Senate, the House remains up for grabs. There are 22 toss-up seats at the heart of the fight, 10 held by Democrats and 12 by Republicans. There are also reports that Biden-Harris Justice Department Special Counsel Jack Smith will end the DOJ's 2 cases against President-elect Trump, charges related to January 6th and the classified documents case in Florida. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
And this week's special guest is joining us all the way from Ohio in the United States. He's a Bible prophecy teacher. His name is John Haller, and he does a weekly program called Prophecy Update. John, it's an absolute pleasure to have you joining us on Behind the Headlines today.
It's great to be with you, Simon. Good to see you.
And John, do you want to just share with us your thoughts on probably the biggest political comeback in American history with the triumph of Donald Trump in last week's presidential election, in which not only did he win the presidency, but he also won the popular vote and took both houses of Congress, and now is the most powerful leader America's seen since President Reagan.
You know, it's a historic win. It's a win that rivals Reagan's win, I think, in terms of his victory in 1984 over Walter Mondale. But it is in the context of what's been going on for the last really 16 years in the United States since Obama was elected in 2008. It is historic. Nobody, you know, as in 2016, nobody gave him a chance. Nobody gave him a chance in 2024. And for him to come back and win not only the popular vote, but the Republicans winning control of both houses of Congress has been an absolutely stunning thing. I mean, I voted in every election. I've been voting in presidential elections for over 50 years. And I've never really seen anything like this. It's pretty stunning.
And John, share with us your serious concerns for Christian and religious freedoms. Had Kamala Harris and the Democrats won the presidency despite the Democrats spending around $1 billion on their election campaign?
Look, I think that the concerns that I had if Kamala Harris had won are still existent. There is a very large entity in the United States. I don't know how to describe it other than the deep state and some of the concerns that you've had there in the UK over things like freedom of speech and things such as that, I think are still existent. The question will be is how quickly Trump can dismantle parts of that deep state. But certainly there is a huge push among the left here in the United States and some on the right to control speech, to shut people down on social media platforms. So I think that the concern that I had about that has not, it's diminished a bit, but it's not gone away in terms of free speech. I think that's one of the critical issues we'll see going forward.
And John, the biggest question of the program has to be, is God giving America a reprieve with a new Trump administration that will be inaugurated in January? And is this really putting the brakes on America's push towards globalism? Just share with us your thoughts.
I'm not sure yet. I think time will tell. I mean, we're only a week past the election. The signs I see are encouraging now. Is this a reprieve from what I think America deserves as God's judgment for abortion and that type of thing? I'm not sure that we're at that point, because abortion is still a big issue here. I think that the Republicans at the national level, the Trump campaign, really pulled back on the issue of abortion because they found that it was not a winning issue. But you know, there were things done in the prior Trump administration to get people in the Supreme Court in place to at least return the issue of abortion to local, state and local control. Of course, that means that people are going to do it. So, look, I think that America is still subject to God's judgment for some of the things that we've done in the past. I don't know that the election of Trump will turn that around.
And John, could you share with us how this new Trump administration plans to push back on the ultra-progressive woke agenda of the previous Biden-Harris administration?
Well, I think the one thing that I've seen, Trump announced yesterday, of course, every Republican in the last 50 years or 40 years has announced that they're going to dismantle the Department of Education that was put in by Jimmy Carter back in the late 1970s. Nobody's ever followed through on that. That administrative giant, part of the deep state, has only grown. Trump has said he's going to do it. I somehow think that I'm hopeful that this time that will happen. That will have a big impact on how children are educated here in the United States. I think the way to judge how effective Trump might be in that is to judge the rather I would term it screeching response from people on the left in the education establishment that Trump might actually be following through on that. So let's see how that goes over the next couple of weeks. We do have a very difficult period of about 70 days now, a little less than 70 days until Trump actually takes office. And I'm concerned about what I call it the Biden administration might do in that period of time, particularly on at the UN global scale and with respect to Israel.
And John, just share with us your thoughts, particularly on the unprecedented speed towards globalism that we saw with the Biden-Harris administration, such as open borders, mass immigration, moves towards a global digital currency and a digital central bank as well as giving more freedom and sovereignty to the United Nations. Just share with us how Trump plans to push back on this.
Well, I think Trump will push back in a number of areas. I've already seen a lot of concern expressed by people on what I would call the woke evangelical, the part of the evangelical church here about immigration. The word is that he's going to appoint Tom Homan as the head of the immigration aspect of the government. Homan is an absolute firebrand on the issue. You should go back and look at some of his videos when he testified in Congress. He will do a lot of what he said on that particular issue, regardless of the cost of deporting people. We have a major problem, so he's going to try to do that. In terms of the other aspects of globalism, look, the push for a central bank's digital currency and that type of thing, they're going to exist. Jerome Powell's going to stay in place, at least he says he is, at the Federal Reserve, which is kind of a strange public-private entity that controls the currency in the United States. They're pushing big for a central bank digital currency. There's also concerns of Trump's relationship with people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, particularly Peter Thiel's close relationship with J.D. Vance, who's been my senator here in Ohio for the last couple of years. So I think I'm going to have to take a wait and see on that. I don't know that the push for the global digital currency, particularly among people in the European Union, is going to necessarily slow down, but it's something we should definitely be cognizant of and watching out as to what's happening. But there are areas of big concern on my part.
Where do you see Trump's victory impacting Israel and the Iranian nuclear problem? Could we see regime change in Tehran? And especially, we saw the IRGC attempted to assassinate Trump during the election campaign. Give us some understanding of the impact of Trump's election in the Middle East.
Well, I think that my concern about the next about 10 weeks till Trump actually takes office with respect to Israel is very concerning. There is even some talk around circles that Biden will resign and Harris would be appointed so she could serve at least a short period of time as the first female president. She has no love for Israel. The push in our government has been consistently to push the Iranian agenda to the front, thinking that, as Obama established and has been followed through now for a very long period of time by everybody in the State Department, defense apparatus, that we can balance things in the Middle East by strengthening Iran. I think this is lunacy. Whether there will be regime change in Iran as a result of policies that Trump might put in, I think that you will see from Trump is what you're already seeing is you're seeing a lot of world leaders already reacting to Trump being in office. For example, you see Qatar kicking Hamas out of their country, telling them to leave. That's a very big deal. That would never have happened under Biden, Harris, or Obama. So I think that Trump would speed up the resupply of Israel in terms of arms, munitions, Arrow 3 missiles, Iron Dome missiles that they need to defend themselves. I mean, I'm looking this morning, every day there's 200, 300 rockets, missiles, drones launched into northern Israel. That's a big concern. So I think that will, the support for Israel will increase. The appointment for UN Ambassador Elise Stefanik is a very strong supporter of Israel. She was sort of the tip of the spear on the congressional investigations into anti-Semitism at some of our larger universities like Columbia and Harvard. Presidents resigned in part because of the questions that she asked. So that's encouraging. I think, though, that Israel needs to keep in mind that Trump will not have much patience for things dragging out. I think that Trump will reinstitute sanctions against the Iranian regime to cut off funding that has now started coming their way. That's going to impact how the relationship with the United States and places like China, which a very, very large percentage of its oil from Iran, if that is cut off. But I think Israel will be given a much freer hand to operate in the region under Trump. But the question is, what's going to happen in the next 10 weeks? We know that, remember, under the Obama administration during that lame duck period, the United States did not veto Resolution 2334 at the UN Security Council, which was a very anti-Israel, anti-Jerusalem, anti-Jewish resolution. I would expect that, and now we find out, by the way, that the Obama administration actually drafted that resolution and then did not veto it. Yeah. I would expect something like that in the future.
And John, what are your thoughts on the kind of lack of Christian influence within the Trump administration with his team that he's actually putting together? Because we know that there is no Nikki Haley. Not surprised that she's not in this new administration, considering her opposition to him. But very surprised that Mike Pompeo's not there. And of course, there's no Mike Pence, his former vice president. What would the lack of evangelical influence not being in his administration have on the direction of US foreign policy and domestic policy in Trump Mark II?
I don't know the religious orientation of a lot of the people that are coming into the administration. I actually like Pompeo, but other people, of course, if you get appointed to a position like the CIA director, you're immediately suspect that you're part of the deep state. I think that that's a concern. For example, there's a gentleman named Kash Patel, who's being touted as a new FBI director or CIA director. Kash Patel will be an absolute bull in a china shop on dismantling aspects of the deep state. I think he might come in as CIA director at this point. So it's a concern that the evangelicals don't have a voice. I'm still trying to dig out information on how evangelicals voted in terms of number in this election. It doesn't look like the participation level was there. And so, look, Trump will do, Trump takes things personally. So if the statistics show there wasn't strong evangelical support, he's just going to move on.
John, where are we prophetically with President Trump now back in power as America's 47th president? And it looks like the brakes towards globalism have been applied. But are we heading for a time of that false peace that we see in the book of Ezekiel with Magog and the Magog War, where we could possibly see a peace treaty in 2025 between the Israelis and the Saudis, the removal of the Iranian regime, and Israel living in a form of peace and stability that she's never known since she's been re-established back on the 14th of May, 1948?
That's a very interesting question. You've been there. I've had a lot of contact with people in Israel since October 7th, 2023. I'm concerned about this. I think as we look about a potential false peace, there is a very dramatic push for peace in the Middle East. There's the new organization, at least 90 nations, and the Global Alliance for the Implementation of a Two-State Solution. My concern is, we talk about this covenant, peace agreement, whatever it might be, coming prophetically. I think that that's ramped up, and my view now is that I think that that's something that might literally be shoved down Israel's throat. And I see all of the stars aligning to make that happen. Saudis are pushing for it. That might change if King Salman passes away. He's 88 and not in very good health. But for right now, Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince, is not going to do anything that goes against his father's wishes. That's a very strong cultural tradition there. But this is a very big deal. Now, whether we're at an Ezekiel 38 stage, I certainly see things aligning that way. Strong relations between Russia and Iran only strengthened in the past week. Russia just signed a peace pact or a defense pact with North Korea. I think that's very significant as well. So I think that we're certainly on track for this peace agreement. And then things that bother me as a Bible prophecy teacher that I see happening. The Jerusalem Post had a very big editorial just yesterday. We need Jared Kushner. That is very significant given his involvement with the Abraham Accords. And he's been working behind the scenes on the Abraham Accords, strengthening his relationship with Saudi Arabia. So this is a concerning thing, and I think we should be watching out for what's happening in that particular area.
Thank you so much, John, for joining us for this edition of Behind the Headlines, and God bless you and all the work you do.
Thank you very much. God bless you too.
And great that John Haller could join us from Ohio to give his perspective on Donald Trump's historic election victory. What was interesting, Reagan, is that the Sunday Times had a really interesting article in which they asked the very important question, why did the Democratic Party lose? Now, prior to reading that article, I didn't know that the Democrat Party was the establishment. So this is what they write. They say the Democrats are the party of the elites, entertainment, which I knew, technology, which I knew as well, but finance and university education. The Democrats are the party of the Manhattan skyline, Wall Street, Santa Monica, Hollywood, Harvard, Yale, Miami Beach, and Chicago Loop. The Democrats outstripped Trump's funding by 3-1, spending more than $1 billion on the campaign, which is an extraordinary amount of money to spend. But also they had big tech on their side, they had Wall Street on their side, and this was almost like a David versus Goliath, in which Trump was the David against the Goliath, and won an historic victory which changes America and changes American history, and we pray forever. But also the Americans didn't like Kamala Harris at all. They didn't like the Democrats, particularly because of their mismanagement of the economy, and also the fact that they were pursuing these extreme, woke, progressive, liberal ideas that just penetrated American society, which took away the rights of parents and gave unprecedented power to these extreme kind of individuals and these extreme groups that were pushing for these kind of liberal progressive views. And the American people said enough. But the most important question is, we have to ask really, is where does Trump's victory fit into Bible prophecy? Because we know that we're living in the last days. Israel is God's prophetic time clock. Israel's at war. So where are we in terms of Bible prophecy?
I think this is a question that's important, and it's equally important that we are cautious and careful in not being overly dogmatic in how we answer it, but by watching and waiting and praying throughout it all. Had Kamala Harris won the presidential campaign, we would almost certainly have a new federal abortion law, and there would be an explosion of liberal progressive policies. This would have had a massive impact on Christian freedoms in the United States. More power and sovereignty would have been given to the UN. There's discussion, and John Haller referenced that there's a significant amount of debate as to what the impact would actually be different in relation to central banking and things like digital currency.
This is cashless society mentioned in Revelation.
Yes, yeah. Trump is actually very much in favor of crypto and is often seen as more favorable toward cryptocurrencies than Kamala Harris.
But cryptocurrency is very different than
it's not.
Central bank.
Not fully, because it's all run on the same infrastructure. I've kept up with crypto for a number of years, and the studies show that the majority of people in favor of who are excited about crypto, things like Ripple and the Ripple infrastructure, Bitcoin as well. All of that is laying a foundation. Ripple is likely to become the foundation on which a central digital currency is built. There's excitement in that community over a Trump presidency, which is why we're seeing things in that regard soar. The difference is, and this is where I think often the central digital currency element comes into play with Biden-Harris, there would have been much more restrictions, much more, and there has been with the US SEC, a lot of restrictions on cryptocurrencies. They would have brought it all together. Will Trump bring it all together, or will he allow everything to be free and have its go?
Well, it depends whether it's free market economics, which we are expecting that Trump would implement. So in other words, the market determines the economy and the actual setup of a central digital bank, or whether it's a communist-style state control, which the Democrats were looking at to actually bring government control over the people. In other words, if we don't like your ministry, we don't like your Christian views, we'll just switch the money off.
And this is what's happened.
And this was the great danger of using a digital currency or cashless society in order to do that, to advance political purposes rather than economic well-being. But the other aspect, I think, with this is in terms of the Middle East. We know that Trump Mark I implemented the Abraham Accords, that Israel was close to signing a historic peace agreement with Saudi Arabia. We had the unprecedented period of almost 4 years of peace and stability. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards have already tried to assassinate Trump during the election campaign, so he could have his target the Iranian regime for a regime change. If that changes, then we could possibly see we're entering into the Ezekiel 38 and 39 false peace before the Gog and Magog war.
That's what I think we need to be wary of in this situation. Trump is God's man for this time, as Biden was God's man for his time, but could we be seeing an entrance as well into that peace when there actually is no peace?
Regan, great to have you back on Behind the Headlines as we discussed the US presidential election. I want to thank you for watching at home. This is a very critical period that we need to pray and intercede regarding the transition of power from Biden and Harris to Trump and JD Vance. And we pray that may Trump put the brakes on the move towards globalism that was currently the current policy of the Democrats. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Behind the Headlines.